November edition of our OAR program. AWE standing for Ageing with Expectation. My name is Graham Adamson. I'm the coordinator of OAR, and I'm privileged to introduce to you Dr. Francis Macnab and Dr. Steven Koski, who today are going to talk on managing conflicts. I think it's fair to say that we all have conflicts in our life, some greater than others, but the main thing is how do we work around them and get through them to better things with stronger relationships to follow. So without any further ado, I shall hand over to Stephen to get us up and running.
Thanks, Graham. Francis, great to see you. Always a pleasure to spend this time with you. I thought it would be interesting. Today. I think one of the inevitable things in life is conflict. Well, first of all, I think the quality of our life, I suspect, has a lot to do with the quality of our relationships and our capacity to be able to manage those relationships, our capacity to resolve the inevitable conflicts that happen. You know, sometimes there are big conflicts, sometimes there are minor conflicts, but the one thing we can count on in life is we'll bump into each other, and we'll experience disagreements, and we'll experience differences, and we'll experience conflict. And so I'm kind of curious, as a therapist, that I imagine you spent a lot of time with people in your life who sat across from you, who are entrenched in some way with conflict in their relationships. I know as a leader, where you have led a church for many, many years, I can pretty much guarantee the fact that you experienced a fair bit of conflict as a leader of the church. I happen to also know you initiated a fair bit of conflict in your life as a leader of the church. So I'm curious to kind of begin, because I think conflict is inevitable. And I think conflict can actually be a gift. It's combat that is optional. I don't think we can avoid conflict. I'm just curious if we can figure out a way to avoid combat, kind of fighting against each other, working against each other. So as a therapist and as a leader of a church, what would you regard as your best wisdom to offer people who experience conflict in their lives?
The best wisdom is to be quiet, to listen, to pause, to give the other person a chance to say, what's bugging them? What's on your mind? If we do that, we have a better chance of hearing how to hear each other better. Because conflict often arises out of our failure to listen, or our failure to hear what the other person is really wanting to say to us. So how to pause and listen.
I think that's so important, because I really believe that, it's not necessarily our differences or even our disagreements that divide us, but it's how we engage those differences and how we engage those disagreements. And so what I'm hearing you say, that one of the most important ways that we can engage with each other when there's disagreement is to stop, to pause, and to listen. So I'm curious about that, because I think you're right. I think listening is probably the most essential tool, not just in conflict, but really with the quality of our relationships. So I'm curious what you think about the importance of what I guess I would call emotional intelligence or emotional wisdom. Because if I'm mad at you, if we're in conflict with each other, and I'm tense and I'm anxious and I'm angry, and my anxiety is at a heightened level, I'm not going to be able to listen very well. So it seems like maybe one of the first things I need to do is to manage my own emotions. You mentioned the word pause. To pause, to breathe. I think of a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being calm, and 10, I'm ready to punch you in the nose. I'm just ready to react. I suspect it's almost impossible to listen if my anxiety, my emotions, my anger is above 5. So it seems like one of the most important things to do is for ourselves to be able to manage our own emotions. Do you agree with that?
Well, of course, emotions can be so volatile, can be so on the ready that we don't pause. We're in there, and we should perhaps press the pause button.
Yeah.
Wait a while. What are you trying to say to me? What is it on your mind?
Yeah.
What's bugging you? Perhaps we listen to each other in that frame of mind. What do you really want me to know what you're saying? What is it? Perhaps we have better relationships.
Mm.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Sometimes I wonder, like with our children, we would say when they're younger, we would give them a timeout to calm down. I sometimes wonder, like particularly when we get in conversations where we're talking over each other, conversations where I'm waiting for you to pause so that I can actually fill in the space and tell you how you're wrong and how I'm right. It seems like when we get in kind of those heated conversations that aren't going anywhere, I know I've recommended to people to say, oh, wait, time out. So what would happen if you said to somebody who you're in conflict with, if you said to them, no, wait a minute, I need to take a time out. What you're saying is really important. And I want to be able to listen to you. And right now I'm kind of anxious. I'm kind of, my emotions are in such a way that I'm not listening very well. And I want to listen. So I'm going to take 5 minutes. And I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to breathe a little bit. I'm going to come back and I'm going to really listen to what you have to say. What do you think about that?
I think it's good, but we don't do it.
Yeah.
Because we're already exploding. And if we're in that battle mode, exploding, we can't listen. So although the ideal is excellent, in practice, we find it very difficult. Very difficult.
So it seems like one of the most important things to do is, I guess, accept responsibility for our own emotional state. I mean, so often, particularly when we're in the midst of conflict, my focus could be on what you're doing wrong, how what you're saying is wrong, how I'm mad at you. And perhaps I just need to stop and take responsibility for the energy I'm bringing into this situation. To widen the gap, I would say, to increase the space between what you're saying and how I respond to what you're saying. Rather than just kind of be waiting, as I said earlier, to be waiting for you to take a breath. It's that trite saying that, I can't remember who said it once, but are you listening to understand, or are you listening to be understood?
Sometimes we're listening in order to get our piece in. So we're really not listening. We're waiting to say, shut up and listen to me. And it's very difficult because we want to get our piece said. We want to get our words in there so that I've got something to say. So shut up and listen. we find that very difficult. If we're busy trying to get our words in, we don't want to let you get your words in, because the space is full with my activity. So what do we do about that? How do we ensure that I can tell you to be quiet for a while, be quiet, and just listen?
I think one of the most important things to do when we want to tell somebody else to be quiet and listen is for us to be the first to be willing to be quiet and to listen.
Yeah.
And to show the other person that we're really interested in what they're saying. Sometimes I think when I want to get in an argument with somebody, when I feel myself wanting to get in an argument, the first thing I want to do is to move from judgment, because if I want to get in an argument, chances are I'm judging what they're saying and I'm judging the person. So what I generally want to do is I want to move from judgment to curiosity. So then I'm curious about what they're saying. I'm curious, why are they seeing it the way that they're seeing it? I'm curious, why do you feel so threatened right now? Now I'm thinking this in my head, I'm not saying it out loud, but why are you feeling threatened right now by what I'm saying? Can I respond differently that might help you to respond differently? When my dog, my English Korean Retriever, was a puppy, I had a trainer. And the first thing she said to me, do not match your puppy's energy. So when the dog's jumping up at me and the dog's all kind of excited, I'd want to get excited. And she said, if you stay calm and relaxed, your dog will calm down. And sure enough. And I think the same thing in terms of our relationship. Sometimes we kind of feed off each other. We escalate, your energy gets higher, my energy gets higher, your anxiety gets higher, my anxiety gets higher. That if we can choose to breathe, to stay calm, to say, tell me more. I want to hear more what you're saying, but saying it in a really calm way. I think that has an impact on the other person. What do you think?
Well, of course, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I've had enough of what you've been saying, enough. So I don't want to listen anymore. But I'm more preoccupied with what I think, not what you think. Do you follow me?
Okay, so that's where I think it's really important. There's a civil rights leader by the name of Ruby Sales who said transformation doesn't happen in headspace in terms of what we think and our opinions. She said transformation happens in heart space. So when you encounter somebody who, like what you said, who, I don't care about what you think, I want you to hear what I think. She says the best thing you can do is to be able to say, is to meet them in the heart place, not the head space. So you say, I'm curious about some of your life experiences that have led you to that opinion. This is what I'm hearing you say. This is what I'm hearing you say about this. This is the opinion I'm hearing. I'm really curious about some of the things that you've experienced in your life that have shaped that opinion. So you're inviting the person, rather than arguing about their opinion that you may or may not agree with, you're inviting the person to tell a bit of their story. And I think stories connect at the heart place, not necessarily the head space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. But we can be in a mode of interaction where we are exploding, and we don't hear. we're not in the space, we're not in the mood to listen to what's going on. So we must say, you shut up and listen to me. And that becomes more difficult. Because I'm in there wanting you to make sure you hear what I'm saying. I'm not listening to what you're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. And I think that's where it comes back to that pause that you were talking about earlier. And the importance of breathing, what you were talking about earlier. And I'm curious whether if we're in that kind of place where if I can recognize that I'm in that space and somehow I can help you to feel valued. You know, I think sometimes it's more important to value the relationship than to be right. And to put a higher value on the relationship than on being right doesn't mean you're wrong. I think what it means is you put such a high value on the relationship that you're going to do your best to keep the dialogue going. And I think that's the key thing, is to keep the dialogue going. If I'm just focused on being right and you're focused on being right, we're just going to be at each other and we're going to talk over each other. So if all of a sudden I can shift and all of a sudden if I can let go for a moment of the need to be right. There's a poet by the name of Yehuda Amici who said, in the places we are right, flowers never grow in the spring. And so often we begin our conversations and we experience our conflict from the place we are right. And sometimes I think, well, what would happen if we shifted that and placed a higher value on the relationship rather than being right? So you're the expert. Tell me how to do that.
I was about to say, easier said than done. Easier said than done. When we're in a conflictual relationship, a whole lot of things are in play. Not only what you're saying, but the feelings behind what you're saying. And those feelings can be very ready to explode and keep us in conflict. I need you to listen to me. I once had a man in my life, and he would bring me to talk about his situation, and sooner or later we get to a point where he'd say, "You shut up and listen to me." So where do you go after that? Once he says, "Shut up and listen to me," he wants to say something, and I need to listen. All right, I'll shut up and listen to you. What do you want to say? What is really valuable?
Yeah.
The valuable thing is we want to remain talking, remain in the relationship. We want to be able to say, yes, I'm still with you. Because often we're pulled out.
And I think that's what's so important, is to recognize that in the conflict, in the conversation, the goal may not be to agree. The goal is to create further understanding.
To keep talking.
To keep talking. Because even in keeping talking, you end up disagreeing better. Because I actually don't think the goal is to disagree less, because I think conflict is inevitable. What's happening in America, and I'm not sure about Australia, is we don't know how to talk with each other because we avoid difficult conversations. You know, we go to our echo chambers, we go to the places, you know, we turn on the television and we only turn it to the channel with the people who agree with what we think. We gather the people around us who will agree with what we think. And we've lost the capacity to have complex, difficult conversations that have depth and ambiguity and that can hold the tension of opposing ideas. which I think is just really vital. I mean, those kinds of conversations are rich and meaningful and help all of us gain further wisdom.
Well, it's how to disagree and remain in a relationship, rather than disagree and say, well, go on, you go. We can't talk anymore. How to disagree and remain talking, remain in the relationship. The relationship is more important, ultimately.
Yeah.
How to remain in the relationship and keep talking. That happens in personal relationships. It happens in international relationships. How to keep talking.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. And that is the key, is to keep talking. Don't necessarily be all that concerned about disagreeing. What's happened in America, I'm curious if the same thing has happened in Australia. There's been a shift that's taken place. And the shift that has taken place is, if you have an opposing idea to me, I no longer have just contempt for your idea. I have contempt for you as a human being. I have contempt for the person who holds the idea. So we have somehow lost the capacity to disagree and still respect the person with whom we disagree. And I was invited recently to give a leadership talk on civility, because particularly around the election season here, there's been some concern we've lost civility. We don't know how to be civil with each other. And the first thing I said is, civility is too low of a bar. I don't think the goal is to learn how to tolerate each other. I don't think the goal is to learn how to be nice to each other. At least in the American context, I think we have to learn how to rehumanize each other. Because in our conversations and in our conflict, we end up demonizing the other. We end up demeaning the other. We end up dehumanizing the other. And I think the goal is to be able to see, to respect you, to not demonize you, to not have contempt for you, even though we may disagree, even though I may actually have complete contempt for your idea and have a completely different idea. I don't have to have contempt for you as a person, as a human being.
Can you make that distinction? Can you, in fact, distinguish between what you're saying and what I think you are? You know, we come down to it, really. Your ideas are ridiculous, right? That's stupid. I'm not. Intolerance quickly jumps in. So no, you're wrong. And you're wrong is not your idea that's wrong. It's you. You're wrong. And
yep.
I'm going to tell you, that's intolerable. I think we don't really face up to the reality of what we feel, or the feeling that is behind our words. And then that really comes in with a punch. What you're talking is nonsense. And what you're saying is nonsense is not far away from saying you are nonsensical. What you say and what I think you are coalesce very quickly. So what do you say to that?
And I think, again, you highlight, I think, one of the most important things, and it's so easy to do. That's a fine line between what you're saying is nonsense and you are nonsensical. And that's where it comes back again, kind of we're looping back around to me needing to take some responsibility, because that's going to happen, particularly when I'm emotionally charged. Back to that scale from 1 to 10. If I'm at 8, I'm emotionally charged, I'm anxious, I'm angry, I'm going to more than likely kind of, that line's going to be blurred. So somehow I have to take a breath. not just tell you to tell, I have to take a breath. I have to pause. And I think one of the most important things that disrupts judgment, because that's what's happening there. I'm judging you. I think one of the most important things that disrupts judgment is curiosity. Rather than judging your nonsensical thing that you're saying, I'm curious about it. I still think it's nonsensical, but tell me more about it.
Yes, but you are being stupid, right? We get to a point where suddenly your viewpoint is unsustainable, but you yourself have become ridiculous. So we can't speak to each other sensibly anymore. Do you follow that?
I do. And I mean, there may be a time to be able to say, hey, let's stop. This isn't going anywhere. This is not productive. I honestly think if more people in their relationships, their marriages, the parent, teenager, whatever it happens to be, if more people were able to recognize, well, this isn't helpful, rather than get into the right or wrong, to recognize, okay, this interaction is not helpful. Let's kind of stop, let's take a break. Let's come back at this a little bit later. But the key again, I think, is for me. So if I'm thinking you're stupid, you're nonsensical, what you're saying is idiotic, that's fine. I'm entitled to that opinion. But that's judgment. That's my judgment. So if I can let go of my judgment and be curious, I sometimes think it's like, if I can look for the innocence behind your behavior. So I think your behavior is ridiculous. Well, what's driving that behavior? What's happening in your life right now? I mean, for all I know, you experienced some traumatic event yesterday that I know nothing about, that is manifesting in your ridiculous behavior. That if I became a little bit more curious, like, I wonder what's going on in your life that is making you react and say the things that you're saying, rather than judging them and rather than me reacting to them. I mean, I think of, this is an extreme example, but when my father had Alzheimer's, at times he got mean and angry. He got angry and said some pretty nasty things. Now I could react to what he's saying, or I could look for the innocence behind the behavior, which is, well, it's his disease that is leading him to say those things. So I don't have to kind of get engaged in that. I can separate myself from that. And I think that same thing can happen, every day in our interactions, rather than react and kind of get caught up in somebody's emotions. Step back, get curious. What's the innocence behind the behavior?
Well, I don't want to step back. You've touched something. You see, emotions and attitudes are so interactive. You touch something in me and I'm angry. And I've got to tell you something that you need to know. And I'm not listening anymore. So listening goes out the window. Because I'm going to tell you, you're wrong. You're an idiot. Anything we put words to that wipes us out of the picture. I'm not going to have this talk any further. It's impossible.
So I am sitting in the chair across from you, the therapist, and you recognize that behavior in me. You recognize that behavior in me. I don't want to talk to you anymore. This is ridiculous. I don't want to listen anymore. what wisdom would you give me? What counsel would you give me? What skills would you give me to shift my energy, to change my perspective?
I think the most important thing is to get out of the zone. Once we're in a zone where we're fighting, we want to move up. So from there to somewhere over here, where we look and say, oh, I'm seeing you differently. And you, what is it? Fighting there? I'll move over here, so I see you differently. How to see the situation from a different angle. How to hear your words saying something different from what you thought before. Is it easy? Not at all. Once we're in the business of creating energy, hostile energy, it's very difficult to pull back and say, let's have another look at this. Let's go away. And in effect, we used to say, didn't we? Calm down. We don't really calm down.
Yeah. You know, I think I've shared this story before, but it's, I just keep going back to this. When a gentleman came to see me because he kept getting into arguments with his wife. And they would go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And he's like what we were saying, she doesn't make any sense. She does, I just don't get it. She makes no sense whatsoever. And it drives me crazy. And I said to him, he said, I just don't understand her. I just do not understand her. So I said, what would happen if you quit trying? Quit trying to understand her. But instead, make it your mission in life to make sure she feels understood. Because they're different. So if you're talking to me and I'm trying to understand you, I'm thinking, are you right? Is what you're saying logical? Does it make sense? Do I agree? And so I said to him, those questions that you're thinking in your head, you are the frame of reference. You are centered on yourself. Just that question, do I agree with this? You're not centered on her, you're centered on you. Notice what would happen if you said, okay, this is what I hear you saying. Am I right? Tell me more. All of a sudden, you're then centered on her. And I said to him, just try making sure that she feels heard. You don't have to agree. It doesn't have to make any sense to you whatsoever. But notice what happens, or what will happen if she feels heard, if she feels seen, if she feels valued. Because ultimately, I don't think the human soul desires to be fixed, desires to be corrected, desires to be convinced. I think the human soul desires to be seen and valued. What do you think?
I don't want to be heard. Full stop. So I don't want to be heard. How can you force me to be heard? You're saying I should be listening. I don't want to listen. I'm not listening. So it's a very, we as one human being to another get into a situation where it becomes impossible because I don't want to listen. I don't want to be heard. I only want my viewpoint to be there. What do you do then? It's very difficult, isn't it?
It is extremely difficult. But I'm convinced, and I've seen it, that if that's your posture, if your posture is, well, I don't want to listen to you, I just want to be heard. I'm convinced if I had the humility, if I had the emotional wisdom, if I had the inner strength to be able to say, okay, I'll set aside my point of view for a while. I'm not going to let it go because it's important to me. But for now, I'm going to put it over there. And I'm just going to listen. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to listen. I'm going to do my very best to help you, or not help you, do my very best to value you. I'm convinced that will change the energy of our interaction.
Well,
if you're jumping up and down, if I'm calm, I think you'll get calm.
I'm likely to accuse you of being a smoker. You're too clever. You're telling me how I should be. You're not listening to where I am. So supposing we move over here. What's happening over here? Nothing. Nothing is happening. So what do we do then?
I think then, I often think, I guess it comes back to, I'm going to push this a little harder, that if I can have less armor, be less defended, have less armor, and more humility and more of a desire to learn, it's going to change the nature of our conversation. So even if you accuse me of being smug, I still think I can be curious about that. I don't have to react to that. I can say, yeah, right, I've been accused of that once or twice in my life. Tell me a little bit more of why you think I'm being smug right now.
Well, that's what you're being now, telling me that when you're being smug.
I'm really good at it.
Well, we're well practiced. Been practicing that all my life. How to be smug. Yeah. So how can we come down from our perch?
Yeah.
Just a minute. How can we come right down, lower still, and be present in a different way from what we were before? How to be present in a different way from what we were before? That's more difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's, I love that. How to be present in a different way than you were before. And we're back to that, it's okay to disagree. It's okay to be in conflict. Can we somehow prevent being in combat? To accept that we can be in conflict with each other, that's inevitable because we're different human beings. But combat is a choice. We don't have to be in combat with each other. Combat
has two syllables. To com, to be with, and to bat, to go into bat. We want to be less intense on doing the batting and more intent on being the calm with, to come alongside. That's more difficult. So how do we do it? We know it should be done, but how do we do it? So here we've got, you're sitting there being a smoker. How do you do it? Move from say, oh, I know all about that. I know the theory of combat, but how about doing it? How do we do it? Very much more difficult.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult, but I think it comes back to your wisdom at the very beginning. At the very beginning of our conversation, you said, listen. We need to listen to each other. And I think that's, it's as simple and difficult as that. If I had a magic wand and I could have a magic wand to change, to change relationships, change the conflict that we experience in relationships, there'd be one skill that I would want people to know: deep, generous, empathetic listening. And listening, and that empathetic listening of recognizing, to me, empathy is believing you as you see it, as opposed to kind of through the filter of how I think you should see it.
Who are you listening to? The question is, who am I listening to? Because often we're not listening to the right person. And so we're responding to the inner person. Don't you talk to me like that? Right? So how do I listen to myself as well as listening to the other person? Listening is hearing you, is also hearing me. If I don't hear me, I'm reacting over here somewhere. How to hear myself, how to hear you is very clever. But if I don't hear myself, I'm reacting to you because I'm feeling something over here in myself. Does that make sense? Someone say this is easy?
But at the same time, I'm convinced that the quality of our life has a lot to do with the quality of our relationships. And the quality of our relationships has everything to do with trying to figure out what we're talking about right now. And being willing to not necessarily need to be right, but to value the relationship and to keep the conversation going.
Supposing you're wrong.
I'm never wrong.
Right. Supposing you're wrong just once. Now, if you're wrong, what happens then?
Well, chances are I am wrong from your perspective. I generally think 98% of the conflict that we encounter generally is not about facts. We're not having an argument about does the bank open at 9 or 9:30. And if that's what we're fighting about, calling the bank is probably a better use of our time. We're having conflict around perceptions and values and feelings where there's more than one right. And I think that's part of the key too, that I can be right, but so can you. It's not an either or. It actually can be a both and. And if we can hold that possibility as well, that yeah, I can be right, but so can you. So we don't have to do this. Imagine if I stopped trying to convince you of my point of view, and I took the time to move alongside you where we could find a common viewing point.
The important thing for you to know is that you're not right. I'm right. I'm right. If I'm right, you can't be right too. So let's get it straight. If I'm right, you can't be right.
Well, I think we get along so well because I know that. And
well,
that's
that's what you say. But I know that you believe you're right, and you're kidding me. You're kidding me, taking me along, and having me believe that you believe one thing when you don't. You don't believe I'm right at all.
So I think, as you mentioned earlier, if the goal is to keep the conversation going, and that's the goal, is to further our understanding, keep the conversation going. It's okay for me to allow you to be right if the conversation keeps going. Because I'm guessing if I'm humble enough, there are probably aspects of the way you're seeing it that I can learn from. If I'm willing to learn, if I enter into the conversation not to prove I'm right, but wanting to learn, because I have a lot I could learn from you. And I happen to think this again is, we can hold two opposing ideas at the same time. We can hold the tension of two opposing ideas at the same time, where I can be right, but I can suspend that and say, I want to learn from how you see this particular situation.
Step one back. I don't want to learn anything from you. But will I listen? So is it possible to listen, even though I'm saying I'm not going to learn anything, because I know what I want. I know what my viewpoint is, but I'll listen to you. Supposing we take this one step away from ourselves, I'll listen, but I have no intention of learning anything from you.
Right. So, and I'm sure we've all encountered that in our lives, in our relationships, in our conversations. I'm sure we've all encountered the person who said exactly what you just said. I don't want to listen to you. I have nothing to learn from you. And if that relationship is important enough to me, that's where, rather than judge you, that's where my emotional maturity is essential. That I need to take that deep breath. And I really value you, and I value our relationship. That's where I'm then going to get curious. And not, rather than be offended, I'm going to get curious. And I want to go, okay, you feel very strongly about this. I want to learn more about that. Tell me more about that. So rather than choosing to get into the argument, I'm going to get curious. And I'm convinced, because to a certain extent, that's valuing you. I value you. I care about you. So I don't want to get into this. And I happen, I'm 90. I think that's called love. I don't know. Could be wrong. But I think that changes the energy of a situation.
Well, you're making many assumptions that I want to do it. Why should I move my position one iota? Why should I move when I know I'm right? If I'm right, you can talk along till the cows come home. I'll still insist my viewpoint is right and you are wrong. Where do we go from there?
Well, I think it depends on our relationship. And I think it depends on what the situation is you're right about. Because I think sometimes it's okay to let people be right. Sometimes it's okay to say, the wider scheme of things, I'm not sure that's that important to get into a fight about this. Sometimes it is, and then it's a whole different street we need to walk down. But sometimes we need to decide, my relationship with you is more important than being right here. So I'm just going to let you be right.
Well, that's a big change. A big change takes place immediately. As soon as you say, I'm going to relax my hold on what I thought was right. I'm going to let it go. But what difference will it make? a world of difference. As soon as you say, I'm not going to hold this any longer, everything changes. So you say, right, okay. What's okay now? What is okay? It's okay to differ. It's okay to be different. It's okay to hold a different viewpoint and be in a different position. It's okay. That makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
You were talking, I got the image of the difference being choosing to live with a clenched fist, where if you have a clenched fist and we're in an argument with each other, we really only have one option, or an open hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you choose to do that, it can change everything. Yeah.
Everything changes.
Yeah.
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 So the posture, okay, the posture you take is critical.
Yeah.
If you're like this, then you're riding your horse full steam ahead into battle. But you're like this. Okay. Okay. But what leads us to that position? How do we come to the point where we can say it's okay for you to be different? Especially when I don't think you have a right to be different. If I think I am right and you are wrong, then you can talk. I'm sitting and saying, yes, but. Yes, but you're wrong. So how do we move from the yes, but to oh, yes, and?
I felt it different, when you just a second ago kind of did this and then went this and you kind of leaned back, there was a change in energy.
Of course. Yes, of course.
And I think if we can change our energy, even if, you're like this, if we're the other person, if we can change our energy, you may not open your hands, but I'm guessing rather than this, you might just move back a little bit. And if our goal is just to keep the conversation going, well, then we may be just, okay, let's let go of this now. Maybe the next time we talk with each other, rather than starting like this, we are starting a little more relaxed.
Well, the second time we come to it and we say, I'm hearing you differently today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to listen to it differently. I want to hear it again. What did you say to me the other day? Say to me, say it again. And you would say, well, the other day I felt so angry. Today I don't feel so angry. I sit back and push myself back and good. What did your mother or father say to you when you were younger? Count to 10, count to 5. Get a new perspective, get a new look at this. Yeah.
Well, I'll try to close a loop on this. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I think of what it says in 1 Corinthians 13, where the writer of that is trying to describe love. And he says, love does not insist on its own way. Imagine if more and more of us would realize that. It's patient, it's kind, and it doesn't insist on being right.
But I insist on being right.
Okay, okay. We're gonna have to go to another day to resume this conversation.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Francis, it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wish someday, I hope it can be in person. And but for now, I'm just really grateful to have this gift to be able to explore these thoughts and these ideas. I always learn a lot, and I appreciate you.
You're very generous, and thank you. Well, meet again in the...
I'm not only generous, I'm right.
Right. Continue to be generous and right.
Okay.
Okay.
Over to you, Graham.
Well, what a great privilege to listen to such an enlightening conversation between two very good friends. Gee, there was a lot in it, wasn't there? I picked out a few things, and I'm sure you will have picked out even more. But anyway, here we go. Firstly, try and avoid combat. And a good way to do that is by listening and by managing your emotions. Try and stay calm. It's amazing how often you hear this advice of stay calm. But do we? I'm sure I don't. Keep talking, keep the conversation going, which keeps the relationship going. And if you value the relationship, that is probably the more important thing, that the relationship is more important than the argument. You can agree to disagree, and I'm sure you'll all agree none of this is easy to do. Anyway, that is all for November. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. And until next time, bye for now.